What if the most difficult place to advance throughout the Formula One calendar? What if Monaco was not only a challenge, but also a perfect opportunity for the SF-25 to show everything he could not so far? From its first kilometers in firing, the car woke up intense emotions in Lewis Hamilton. With a mixture of respect and enthusiasm, he declared that being at the wheel of a competition Ferrari was a dream come true, something that he even needed to assimilate. These words, pronounced in an almost childish tone, revealed much more than a superficial reaction. For Hamilton, this project represented much more than a new professional stage. It was an emotional mission, a personal challenge. However, that initial enthusiasm soon crashed with a more raw reality. The pre-season training did not offer definitive responses. Ferrari showed competitiveness flashes, but also lagoons in consistency. The team seemed to be in a self-discovery phase, testing different paths without even achieving a base configuration that would serve as a reference. The difference with McLaren was palpable. While they knew exactly how and where to tighten the development of their MCL39, Ferrari still seemed to look for their identity. This situation was especially frustrating for Hamilton, who expected a faster adaptation process, underestimating the complexity inherent in a completely new project. One of the most intriguing aspects of the 2025 season is how Ferrari has managed to maintain a profile under the real problems of SF-25. In an environment like Formula One, where transparency is increasingly common by the teams, Ferrari continues to operate as a silent fort. The Scuderia has demonstrated an almost surgical ability to control the flow of information, and that has contributed to the very few really understand why the car is not yielding to the expected level. What they have suggested, carefully dosed in interviews and leaks, barely scrapes the surface of a deep and complex technical iceberg. The root of the problem is in a key concept: the behavior of the car under low fuel conditions. This directly affects the classification batches, which in Formula One are critical, and even more in a circuit like Monaco, where to advance is almost impossible. The SF-25 was conceived with an aerodynamic architecture that seeks general efficiency, but did not properly anticipate how this configuration would behave when the deposit is emptied. What happens, according to internal sources, is that the aerodynamic pressure center of the car moves abruptly to the rear when the fuel load is reduced. This phenomenon completely destabilizes the equilibrium of the car and forces the team to make a radical decision: increase the shooting height to prevent the flat bottom from touching the asphalt. That simple adjustment to raise the height of the car has devastating consequences in terms of performance. When doing this, Ferrari loses approximately 20 aerodynamic charging points, a considerable figure that can make the difference between being in the pole or being out of the top 5. It is a forced sacrifice. If they do not, the car becomes intractable. If they do, they become non-competitive. This technical dilemma has conditioned the entire start of the season. And although it has not explicitly communicated to the public, within the paddock many rival engineers intuit it, because of the way in which the SF-25 behaves, especially in classification compared to the rhythm it manages to hold in the race. But that's not all. Another fundamental problem, more difficult to correct, is the inconsistency in the aerodynamic response of the car. Under normal conditions, F1 cars must offer a progressive and predictable sensation in changes of direction and deep braking. However, Ferrari and especially Hamilton pilots have reported an erratic response, with subtle but critical alterations in aerodynamic load at the time of turning the steering wheel. This destroys trust. And if there is something that a pilot needs in a circuit like Monaco, is precisely that, knowing that the car will react the same every time without surprises. In aggressive braking areas, the SF-25 also shows symptoms of lack of stability. It is not just a balance issue. In some sessions, power loss has been detected in the braking system, which further compromises curve. If we join this to a car already unpredictable by the displacement of the pressure center, we get a machine that can only work in an extremely narrow operating window. The slightest diversion in track conditions, tire temperature or suspension configuration, and the car becomes unstable. This is a structural problem that Ferrari cannot solve with a simple aerodynamic update. And there is even more. There is a reason why these issues have not been publicly addressed: reputational risk. Ferrari cannot afford to recognize that, after redesigning almost the entire car, the result is a car that cannot be properly classified without sacrificing its aerodynamic integrity. Internally, there is pressure, but also a sense of responsibility for maintaining the narrative of a project under construction, not of a failure. That is why every time Hamilton speaks of the car in public, he does it with a diplomacy studied, noting that there is potential, but that they are learning how to unlock it. That is the key word: learn. because Ferrari at this time is in a constant technical deciphered process. And yet, in the midst of all these complications, there is an idea that remains alive within the team. If they manage to find the perfect configuration, even in certain circuits, the SF-25 can be a lethal weapon. Not because it is the car faster, but because, in the right circumstances, it can offer unexpected performance. And that remote possibility, that is the one that maintains the motivation on both the engineers and in Hamilton. Because they know that if they manage to find that perfect balance in a place like Monaco, they could reverse the course of the whole season. But the question that torments them is another. What if that ideal point never comes? What if the potential is there but always out of reach? Monaco is not just a circuit. It is an absolute precision test, an exam that does not admit errors and that rewards total trust between pilot and machine. It is also the place where everything that makes a car different for better or worse is exposed mercilessly. Each narrow curve, each ground change, each acceleration in limited space highlights both the virtues and defects of a car. And for that reason, Monaco could be the salvation of SF-25. Not because you hide their failures, but because it cancels many of the factors that have made them so visible so far. In other words, Monaco does not demand what the SF-25 cannot give, and that makes it an allied track at this point of the season. Lewis Hamilton knows it. And it is no accident that he has put so much emphasis on this Grand Prix since his recovery in Imola. For him, Monaco represents more than a simple technical challenge. It is a unique opportunity to change this season's story. Your body language, your public statements, and your behavior in previous sessions reflect a conviction that is not common in this point of an adaptation process. He is convinced that here and only here the car can give him the necessary tools to fight forward. It is not an illusion without foundation, but a precise reading of the type of demand that this layout raises and how these can coincide, almost by accident, with the hidden strengths of the Ferrari. The key is in the very nature of the Monte Carlo circuit. Being an urban and low-speed layout, high-load aerodynamic demands are not as determining as in other places. Straight efficiency matters less, and what gains prominence is mechanical grip, traction capacity in slow curves, and short braking stability. These are the areas where Ferrari has shown some relative solidity, especially in career conditions. In addition, there is less demand in aerodynamic balance in high speed. The problem that arises with the pressure center by reducing fuel could be minimized. In summary, the SF-25 has, at least on paper, a technical profile that best suits Monaco's specific demands. The second great advantage is strategic. Monaco is, historically, the circuit where the classification has the most weight. Advancing is practically impossible without extreme errors or conditions. Therefore, a good round on Saturday can mean half-done work. And although that seems to play against Ferrari, who has had problems extracting the best of the car on a return, there are signs that they are closer to solving that dilemma. In Imola, and even more in China, Hamilton showed increasing confidence in the car in low fuel load conditions. He even starred in one of the best laps of classification of the season, demonstrating that, if the conditions are correct, it can extract that maximum performance of the SF-25 when it is most needed. Another determining factor is the emotional and technical stability of the equipment. Ferrari arrives in Monaco with a better understanding of his car, with concrete data about where they waste time and with a stronger correlation between simulator and track. They have adjusted their approach, have refined the procedures for tuning, and are adopting a more reactive and flexible philosophy during the race weekends. That is, they are learning to run with the car they have, not what they would like to have. That technical maturity, combined with a less demanding circuit in aerodynamic terms, could be just what they needed for everything to click for the first time in the season. And at the center of everything there is Lewis Hamilton. It is not only your experience that makes a difference, but its ability to read the important moments. Throughout his career, he has demonstrated a particular instinct to maximize opportunities in complicated circumstances. He did it in Turkey 2020, in Silverstone 2008, in Brazil 2021. And if something has Monaco, it is that air of emotional and technical complexity that he usually makes an advantage. He is at a turning point not only in his year but in his stage with Ferrari. A good performance here does not guarantee the success of the project, but a bad one would put it again under a mantle of difficult doubts to dissipate. In short, Monaco is much more than the 8th date of the calendar. It is the perfect mirror to reveal who really understands his car, who is in control of the process, and who can run under pressure. For Ferrari and for Hamilton, it is the place where they can rewrite a narrative that has so far been of frustration, doubts, and slow learning. If they manage to take this opportunity, the Monaco Grand Prix is not just another race in the calendar. It is a definitive proof that can separate the projects destined to the oblivion of those who find a second life when they least expect it. For Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton, Monaco represents that critical border between technical failure and competitive rediscovery. The SF-25 has been an unknown since its debut, but in the unique context of this circuit, that uncertainty can be transformed into an unexpected advantage. Not for being the best car, but for being the right car at the right time and place. Hamilton arrives with a renewed determination, with the confidence that he gives to have deciphered a key part of the behavior of the car, and with the knowledge accumulated in Imola and China. Ferrari, on the other hand, has left behind the operational rigidity of the past and begins to show signs of tactical and technical flexibility. In this context, everything is prepared for a weekend that can mark a before and after. Not only for the SF-25, but for the entire project that represents the new cycle of the Scuderia. Because a victory here not only has sporting value, but a monumental psychological impact on the team, the rivals, and the championship itself. However, Formula One does not offer guarantees. Monaco can be both a miracle and a disguised trap. The track can level conditions or expose defects that were barely visible in other places. And that is why this race has such a strong symbolic weight, because it reveals, with brutal honesty, if the car is really prepared to compete at the highest level, or if its limitations will continue to mark the pattern. What happens this weekend will have consequences beyond the points. It will be a clear sign of what we can expect from the rest of the year. Now the question is for you. Do you think Hamilton and Ferrari are ready to turn Monaco into their time of redemption? Or do you think that the SF-25 will once again fall short, caught by its own structural limits? Leave it in the comments.